and that dog that won the whole thing for Canada was a Chihuahua. So like any dog is a dog, okay? They all got the same kind of things going on with them, right? The first thing that we need to know about dogs, okay, is that they learn by association. Can anybody tell me what association means? Anybody? I'm gonna help you out, okay? All right, so you know how when you smell chocolate chip cookies, right? What do you think of when you smell chocolate chip cookies?
Something really yummy.
Something really yummy. Do you think of maybe home? Do you think of maybe your mom, right? You think of all those things. That's an association that you have with the smell of chocolate chip cookies. Now dogs only learn by association, okay? See, we are what you would call cognitive thinkers, right? Cognitive. That means that we can be taught something and like our brain figures it all out. Right? We are capable of higher reasoning, right? But dogs can't do that, right? They learn by association. So the best way for me to get you to kind of understand this, okay, is just because we teach our dog to sit in the kitchen doesn't mean that we taught our dog to sit on the front lawn. It doesn't mean that we taught him to sit at the park. And it doesn't mean that we taught him to sit anywhere other than in the kitchen. They associate it with the kitchen. They associate it with a person. They can associate it with the way that you're standing, with the wave of your hand, okay? And so like, a lot of times, we hear like dog trainers and people who train dogs, we hear them use words like sit and down and all those things. It's not that we're teaching those dogs what those words mean. We're just teaching them to associate the sound of that word with something that they do right after it, okay? And if we can get them in enough different places and do it enough different times, then they'll just begin to generalize it, like Jack here, okay? What Jack is doing is called a place command, all right? What place means is get on this and don't do anything else until I give you something else to do, all right? And so I've gotten Jack in enough different places and done it enough different times that when I say place, he goes, oh, I know what that means, and he does it. Right? For you guys, right, if I were to do the same thing, if I were to teach you a place command, right, if I were to say, place means jump up on your chair, right, and then I'd say, place, and you guys jumped up on your chair, and I'd be like, way to go, guys. After that, anytime, anywhere we went, if I went, place, you guys would jump up on a chair, and you'd be like, ah, yeah, I did it, right? That's a cognitive thinker. Jack had to do this about 1,000 different times, in 1,000 different places, on 1,000 different things, in order to understand place, all right? Now, see, so like if I say, Jack Sparrow, place, then he'll get in the chair, all right? And he knows that I want him to stay on the chair until I give him something else to do. Jack Sparrow, place. All right? If I were to point at a fire hydrant and say, Jack Sparrow, place, he would jump up on the fire hydrant. But we don't have any fire hydrants here, so I can't show you that trick, all right? Okay, so does anybody want to know the name of my company? All right, I should probably write it down for you.
Maxine,
right?
can you give this to him?
Here, I'll come over and grab it.
Thank you.
All right, the name of our company is Shackle Free Dog Training. Okay? The tagline, just in case you wanted to know this, is we teach people. Ooh. We teach people how to train their dogs. What's different about that is a lot of other places, they'll train your dog for you and bring your dog back to you, okay? Now, after what I've shared with you about the way dogs learn, why could that be a problem if somebody else trains your dog and then brings it back to you?
Because you wouldn't know what to do to make him look sick.
Well, there's that problem, right?
And
That
it
is a
would be
problem.
listening to the trainer.
Huh?
It would be used to listening to the trainer.
It would associate everything with their dog trainer, right? And not with you. They learned everything from the dog trainer. They didn't learn it from you. And so like when the dog comes home and says place, and you say place, the dog's like, I don't know what that means. We never did this together, right? And so that's like a really good example of how dogs learn. It's by association, okay? So let's get into some of these questions. My first set of questions, I don't have a name for. So like if you know that these are your questions, you just wave at me, and so that way I can actually address you. This first question is, how do you get puppies to obey you? All right, is that one yours? So you're asking specifically about a puppy, right? Is this like a puppy that you want or a puppy that you have?
Those that I have.
A puppy that you have. Okay, so when I'm thinking of a puppy, what I'm thinking of is any dog that's between the ages of just being born to about 6 months old. Okay, so how old is your puppy? 2. Okay, so for me, that's an adult dog. Right? So you're no longer training a puppy, you're trying to train an adult dog at 2 years old. Okay? So, all training starts in the same place. Okay? All that training starts, for me, with leashes and collars. Okay? And because we have to know and understand what are the different ways that we have to train out there. Okay? So for me, I like to use leashes and collars. It's just a preference, just what I like to use. Right? Other people like to use treats. Okay? Here's what I know about training dogs. Okay? Is that there's all kinds of different dogs. Right? There are some dogs that you can use treats to train them all day long, and they'll do everything that you ask them for a treat. Right? And then there's some dogs that you can train with a treat, but then when you take them outside, they want to chase after the squirrel or chase after the neighbor's cat. And they don't care what kind of treat that you have in your hand. They would much rather chase after that squirrel. Okay? So that's the drawback to using food as a way to train your dog. I'm not saying you don't use food to train your dog. I'm just saying that that's its drawback. The drawback to using leashes and collars like I like to use is that if it's not on, I don't have a way to communicate with my dog. Right? So I have to train with them for a very long time with a leash and a collar until they get to the point where they just accept that that's the way that they act and respond everywhere we go. Right? And so that's how I start. Training, I start from the time, so we adopted Jack when he was 4 months old, okay? And he started training with a leash and a collar like this. And then when he was about 5 months old, we started his electronic collar training. And his electronic collar was so that he didn't have to be on a leash, but I could still communicate with him and tell him what it is that I wanted and what it is that I didn't want, right? Okay, so for me, the way you start training a puppy, the way you start training a dog, is leashes and collars. Other people would say treats, and they're not wrong. They're just not agreeing with me, and that's okay. All right? Okay. All right, let's go on to the next question. All right. Okay, it says, what do you do to train puppies? What do you do? Okay, so for some people, right, they would take the treat and they would hold the treat in their hand and they would ask the dog for a sit, right? And they would get the dog to understand that sit means put your bum on the ground, right? And then they would give them a treat. For me, since I use leashes and collars, the way that it starts with me, right? Jack Sparrow, come. Is I put on a leash and a collar, right? And so when I say, Jack Sparrow, sit, I put a little bit of pressure until he actually sits, and then I let that pressure release. Right? Did y'all see that? So I just pull up just like that, and he sits, and then I let that pressure go. Right? And what I'm teaching him there through that pressure is that, I've asked you to do something. And as soon as you do what it is that I'm asking you to do, that pressure is going to go away. Right? And so this is a way that I've been taught my whole life with my heavenly father. He does that a lot with me. He puts me through a lot of pressure, right? And then if I make the right choice, that pressure goes away. And if I keep on being hard-headed and stubborn about it, well, then that pressure continues, right? And so that's kind of where we get that idea. That's where we get that idea from, okay? So that's what I do. That's how I use that. Okay, the electronic collar that Jack Sparrow has on is a special collar that it uses an electrical current, but it goes in and it stimulates a muscle on his neck, right? And that muscle tenses up like this. It goes like that. And so it feels like something's getting tight around his neck. And so if I've taught him how to do this, then when I start to use the electronic collar, it makes sense to him. And so I push the button and he sits, and I let go of the button and he goes, okay, I understand. I'm doing what you want. Okay? What type of dogs do you train with? Whose question was this? That's yours too?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, what type of dogs do I train? I train all dogs. I train all types of dogs. All types. Any breed, any size, doesn't matter. Any behavioral problem that they have, I do it all. But I am a behavior problem trainer, okay? So what I mean by that is I am not a service dog trainer. I don't train service dogs. Service dogs are the dogs that help people with disabilities, right? They help people who can't see, people who are blind. They help them walk through the city and do things for them around the house. They're actually hearing, those are seeing eye dogs. They're actually hearing ear dogs for people who cannot hear, people who are deaf. They actually have dogs that can help them hear. There are diabetic alert dogs, people who have diabetes and get low blood sugar, high blood sugar. There are dogs that live with them and help alert them to when those things are happening. They'll actually stop them from going up somewhere. If their blood sugar is too low, they'll actually prevent them from getting in a car and driving somewhere or even leaving their house at all. If they go into a diabetic shop, they're actually trained to go and get them their insulin and bring it back to them and help them with that. You know, there's those types of dogs. There are so many different service dogs these days. So many different service dogs. And so like that is a completely different area of training, right? What I do is I help people that have a dog that's not behaving properly. Yeah, what's the question?
It's not a question. I just heard about this one guide llama or something like that. Service llama or something. Yeah.
Okay.
Really weird, don't you think?
What's the question? What did you hear about again?
Something like a service llama or a guide llama or something like that.
Oh, guide llama. Okay.
A llama?
Oh, okay, a llama, a service llama. Yeah, I don't know about that. I don't know about service llamas or service peacocks or service monkeys. I don't know about any of those, but I do know a little bit about service dogs. All right. Now, one of the questions is, what's your favorite breed of dog and why?
Ooh, that's mine.
That one's yours? Okay. All right. My favorite breed of dog is the mixed breed. Okay. As you can tell, I have a mixed breed dog. All right. That is a dog that most people will refer to as a mutt or hound or whatever. You know, they are a dog that two dogs got together and they had puppies, and you know that whatever comes out, right? Jack Sparrow is a Jack Russell Terrier boxer mix. Okay, that means that, you know, there was a Jack Russell Terrier and a boxer, and they made Jack Sparrow. Okay, all right. And so, you know, what that means for me is that our mixed breed dogs, which are usually the dogs that you find at any of your rescue agencies or your pounds, as some people call them, the animal control centers, right? Those dogs that they have for adoption there, those are usually going to be a mixed breed dog, right? You're not going to see a lot of purebred dogs. And a purebred dog would be like a German Shepherd or a Papillon or a Panda Shepherd, or you know, any of those kinds of breeds. A teacup Chihuahua is a purebred dog, right? That means that there have been people that have been breeding those dogs for many, many years, and they can trace the lineage of your dog. They can trace the lineage of your teacup Chihuahua back at least 4 or 5 generations, right? And they've got the papers to prove it, okay? That's a purebred dog. I'm not a purebred dog kind of a guy. I'm more of a mutt myself, right? I mean, just look at me. I kind of look like a mutt, don't I? Right? And so you know, that's why I like mixed breed dogs, because they come with less health complications. They have less hip dysplasia and all those different types of things, and you kind of get the best of 2 breeds, right? So Jack Sparrow, look at that. He's extremely smart, but he's also like a boxer. So he just likes to be around people. He likes to have fun and have a good time and just run and play and do all those kinds of things. And so that's kind of what I like about mixed breeds, is you get the best of both. All right, we're going on. Now this one's got names. Here's Peter.
Me.
All right, Peter, I got some more questions from you. Where did you learn to be a dog trainer? All right, so I got my first dog to train when I was 10 years old. Anybody? How old was everybody in there?
11, 12, 9.
All right, I was 10. I was 10 years old. Her name was Dixie. My dad got her from the local pet shop. She was a purebred dog. She was a golden retriever. And we called her the Blonde Blur because she was crazy, absolutely nuts. And so my dad came to me one day and he said, "Do you like your dog?" And I said, "Yeah, I love my dog. She's great." And he said, "Okay, well, you better learn how to train her because she's driving your mama nuts." And so it was my dad's hobby to train dogs. And so he started teaching me how to train Dixie. And then I started reading books. And I started learning other stuff, stuff other than what my dad had taught me. And I just kind of grew up doing it. And I didn't realize that people got paid to train other people's dogs until about 16 years later. I was 26 years old, and I was looking for a job, and I saw an ad in a newspaper. Newspapers are these things that are made out of, I'm just kidding, I know that you guys know what newspapers are. All right, I was looking at an ad in a newspaper, and it said, "Dog trainer needed, no experience required." And I said, "I can do that job." And I went down there and I convinced them to give me the job, and they did. And so that's when I started my professional career as a dog trainer. It was in Dallas, Texas, for a company called Man's Best Friend. Okay? And so I worked at Man's Best Friend for 3 years, and I got to train dogs every day, all day long, and that's kind of where I learned a lot of the stuff that I learned now. Now I've even learned more stuff than I learned at Man's Best Friend and even from growing up, because it's a process. You continue to learn. You've got to learn something new every day if you want to continue to be effective, right? Off.
What was he doing?
He was chewing at himself. He's very sensitive to fleas, right? And so being here in Florida, and there are fleas all over the place, he gets, we have to constantly keep him, up to date on all of his flea stuff, because he will start to chew on himself. You see this spot down his back? This is his favorite spot to chew on. You see how it's kind of pink? Right? That's not actually from blood or anything like that. There's actually an enzyme in dog saliva. And so when a dog has white fur like this, if they start to chew on themselves, the enzyme in the saliva will start to oxidize. When it hits the air, oxygen starts to, right? And so it hits the air, it starts to oxidize, and it'll turn the fur pink. That's what that is. If you were wondering, now you have that information.
Oh.
All right. Now, what reward do you use for training dogs? There's times where I use food. Okay. It depends on what I'm trying to teach. Right. Most of the time, I'm doing it for affection Now, dogs see food as affection. They see food as love. They're a lot like me. I see food as love. If you want to tell Mr. Patrick that you love him, you make him some biscuits and gravy. That's what I associate with love. Right? That's one of my associations. Not like chocolate chip cookies, but it's biscuits and gravy. It's just as good. I promise. I promise. You love biscuits and gravy? Come on, I'll tell you. That's what I say. All right, but for dogs, when you feed them, that's love for them. They see that as love. But most of the time, what I'm trying to get them to do it for is this right here. Right, a little more. Yeah, a little more. Right? He likes to hear that sweet sound of my voice. He likes me to give him pettings on the head like good for her, right? And that's what I'm using to teach my dogs is just good old-fashioned love and affection. Because I'll always have my hands on me, hopefully, right? so I'll always have my hands on me unless, one of these unruly dogs takes them from me, right? But
what happens if a dog licks himself all over? Does he just...
He would turn all pink. You would be all pink. And my daughters would not mind that.
Do you think that would look good on a dog?
It depends on the dog, really. I think it depends on the dog. Let's see. How many dogs do I own? I own one dog. I only own one dog. One dog's enough for me. I only own one dog. Just Jack Sparrow. It's just me and him and a house full of girls. All right. All right. I only got to train a dog to do. I assume this is what do you train a dog to do? Is that what that whole question was?
That sounds like that would be right. Yeah.
Sounds like that. All right. I train a dog to do basic obedience. Okay. And we train dogs, and I train dogs to do basic obedience specifically for behavior modification. You don't need me to write that down? You don't know how to do that one? Here we go. All right. It's for behavior modification. Can anybody take a stab at what that means?
Changing their behaviors so that they behave good.
There you go. Very well put. Come on. That's what's up.
Good job,
baby.
Peter.
Way to go. Yes, that's exactly what that means. So we got dogs that like they jump up on people, or maybe they don't like other dogs, or maybe they don't like people at all. Right? And so I train them in basic obedience so that we can give them more information. Because most of the time when dogs are acting inappropriately, it's just because they're scared or they just don't know any better or any of those types of things. And so we just give them the information that they need so that way we can then get them to behave appropriately, right? And sometimes those things don't go away, right? If we have an extremely fearful dog that's trying to bite people, they might never like people. We're not going to get that dog to just be like, hey, people are awesome. But we can at least get them to know and understand what it is that we want, right? That we don't want them to try to bite people, but we do want them to stay over here on their place, right? And then what we teach them is, if you just stay there, I promise I will keep all the bad people away from you, right? And that's what we try to teach them, right? Okay. What is the most common dog breed that I train? A lot of doodles. Who had the Labradoodle? You had the Labradoodle, right? You had the Labradoodle? Training a lot of oodles these days. So they're Labradoodles, Golden Doodles, Aussie Doodles, Bernedoodles, all the oodles. All the oodles. Training all the oodles.
Are the oodles high strung and need training?
The oodles are very, very high energy dogs. Very high energy dogs.
That's
Yeah? Very high energy dogs. Especially like the Labradoodles. And Labradoodles are, they're just happy-go-lucky, wow, but they're also super smart. And so like they can become a super big problem if you allow them to, right? They'll just come in and take over your house. Dun, dun, dun. How do you train a dog to help a blind or deaf person? Okay, so this is going into that service dog category, right? And what I can tell you is service dogs cost a lot in this country, okay? Typically, a service dog for a blind or deaf person costs them around anywhere from like $25,000 to $75,000, okay? They also, the blind people and the deaf people also have to go through training themselves, right? Because it's actually really, really hard. You wouldn't think it's this way, right? But it's actually really, really hard to just kind of put your trust in a dog, right? And trust that they're gonna do the right thing, right? And so it takes a little bit of training for those people to be able to have those dogs, right? So the person has to go through training, the dog has to go through training, and usually it's about a 3-year process. 3 years. Yes, sir.
How would a deaf person train his dog if, like, they can't talk and anything?
Well, that's the thing is most of the time, a service dog is being trained by a service dog company. Okay, so a good example of that is Canine Companions right here in Orlando. All right, Canine Companions is a service dog company. Now they're actually a really cool service dog company. They actually give their service dogs away. I know, right? It's pretty cool of them, right? They actually give their service dogs away. Other service dog training companies, they put, 2 to 3 years of work into their dogs, and they expect about $25,000 to $75,000 in return for all the work that they put into those dogs over the past 3 years, and that's why they're so expensive. But you know where they start? It's basic obedience. As soon as that puppy is chosen to be a service dog, because at first they have to choose the puppies. So most of the service dog companies, the other thing that they're doing is they're breeders, right? They're breeding the dogs that they're breeding the dogs that they're going to train to be service dogs, right? And so then they choose, like they have a litter of puppies, and they choose out of that litter which ones are going to be service dogs. Now, not all of them are going to be suitable for it. So maybe out of a litter, maybe 2 or 3 of them will get chosen to be service dogs, right?
Oh wait, how big is the litter?
It depends on the dog. But for service dog for the types of breeds that they typically use for service dogs, they are using a lot of oodles these days. They are using a lot of labradoodles. But typically, we're talking about German shepherds, labs, and golden retrievers, right? So out of those types of breeds, typically you're going to have anywhere from $5 to $7, right? So out of that litter, only 2 to 3 are going to be chosen, right? And so the other ones will get sold, right, to just be pets, right? And then they take those 2 or 3, and at 8 weeks of age, they start training them in basic obedience. And they have to be ready to start the training by the time they're a year old, right? Which means they have to have gone into all types of situations. They have to be able to go into downtown Orlando and walk around the streets of downtown Orlando without getting scared. They have to be in big groups of people, so they'll take them in big office buildings, and places like that, make them go up elevators, down elevators, go in stairwells, out of stairwells. They take them in as many different places as they can. At any point in that year, if they prove to themselves to be a dog that gets scared of things and doesn't really, and is acting afraid of people and all those types of things, they get rejected, and then they get sold for, as a pet dog, or they'll get adopted as a pet dog, right? But if they prove themselves to be a good candidate at a year old, they'll go into service. They'll start their service dog training. This is when they start learning how to turn on lights. This is where they start learning how to actually stop walking at a curb. So if somebody's holding on to them and they're walking along and they're following them, the dog will come to a curb and stop. Right? They'll start learning how to read traffic signs. They'll start learning all of that information, so that they can actually guide a person around town. And they'll do that for about 2 years, and when they're about 3 years old and they graduate, they get their owner. Okay? All right. Where's David? All right, David, I got some questions for you. How do you train the dogs if they are really mean? Very carefully. Take it? No, I'm just kidding. Okay. These are the jokes, folks. These are the jokes. It depends on how mean they are. Okay? So if we're just talking about a dog that's like super scared and is really just kind of biting at somebody, they're biting at somebody, and they're not trying to bite somebody, then I might just use a leash and a collar at first and earn their trust and get them to like me, and then I'll go on from there. If they're actually trying to bite somebody, I'll start with a muzzle. I'll put a muzzle on them. Does y'all know what a muzzle is? Okay, it's just a little contraption, keeps them from biting. So I'll put a muzzle on them, and we'll start the training there. Whatever we do though, what we're doing is we're going to teach them basic obedience. Okay, is the first step. So I got to get them to know the 6 obedience commands that I teach. All right, these aren't the 6 obedience commands that everybody teaches. These are just the ones that I teach. Okay, and those are heel, sit, down, place, come, and off. Those are the 6 words that I can use to communicate with my dog in any situation that they're in. Right? Right, so heel, sit, down,
Okay.
heel, sit down, place, come, and off. Heel, sit, down, place, come, and off. Okay? And I can use those 6 obedience commands to teach my dog anything that I need them to know and understand about doing life. Right? And so then I take those 6 obedience commands, and that's when I start to
What
tell
are the
them.
words again? Heel, sit down.
Heel,
place.
sit down, place, come, and off.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And so, what I do then, okay, once they know those commands, right, I'm going to do what we call structuring their lifestyle, okay? I add structure to their life. What I mean by that is if you're a mean dog, it's usually coming from a place of fear. It doesn't look like you're afraid, right? But you are, right? And so even though you're trying to bite me, I know that just because you're trying to bite me doesn't mean that it usually means that you're afraid, that you're fearful, right? So then I take those obedience commands and I teach them how to be around stuff that they're afraid of. And then I start to use food, okay? Because remember, dogs learn by association, right? Okay, so here's a really good way to explain this. All right.
Eating Jack Sparrow.
All right, so the way that you give a dog a treat, right, is you come up and you put a treat in your hand like this, and you just offer it to him. Now, if Jack Sparrow wants to take the treat, he'll take the treat, okay? And then you just walk away. Are you all ready? So we're going to come up one at a time. All right, wait till I call you. And we're going to do a really good example